Hello again, Chris Lee at Southeastern 16, joined by Chase Robinson, playing hurt today. You know what that means when you hear his voice. We are here to preview college football playoff semifinal between Ohio State and Texas. In my opinion, the two most talented teams in the country. You may catch this at 6:30 Central on ESPN Friday, January the 10th. BetOnline has Ohio State as a 6-point favorite with an over-under of 53. That makes for an implied final score of Ohio State 29, Texas 23. Chase, both these teams playing really well. Probably nobody in the country playing better than Ohio State, though. Ohio State really didn't let Tennessee on the field in Columbus till it had about a 21-point lead. Avenged its only non-Big Ten loss with a 41-21 beating of Oregon last week in a game that really wasn't that close for very long. Meanwhile, Texas comes in with two nice wins, home over Clemson, followed by a white knuckler against Arizona State in a game that Texas had all but wrapped up until Cam Scattleboo took over. Very much looking forward to seeing how these two teams match up here in the semis.
Yeah, when you talk about Ohio State, I mean, we talk about teams getting hot towards the end of the season. Ohio State has become dominant in these college football playoffs. They lost that game to Michigan to end the regular season. But what we've seen from them in these two playoff games is unlike anything that I've seen a team go from what we saw in that, last week of the regular season to what we're seeing now. It's incredible. I mean, they're absolutely dominating people. They're more than just the hottest team in the country right now. They're the most dominant team to me right now. The way they're playing, the way they're executing, the way they look, just really impressed with Ohio State. And yeah, Texas, I feel like in that Peach Bowl game, I mean, you mentioned it, they had it all but wrapped up, and you can't let Scatterboo go, and he did some terrific things, and Texas did what good teams do, and they find a way to win. So you look at both of these teams, and while Texas is in a position where they've been talked about being up at the top all season. They lost to Georgia in the SEC championship. We thought, well, is this kind of the same Texas team? We look at Ohio State at the end of the regular season, losing to Michigan, their bitter arch rival, but then again winning these first two teams. I feel like these teams are kind of in the same position. They've been talked about really since the beginning of the season, Chris, that these could be two teams that could compete for a national championship, and one of them will be competing for a national championship, the winner of this game. And so I kind of feel like both of these teams are in similar positions. Ohio State is just playing so good right now, and they're really dominating their opponents.
Yeah, I look back at the Michigan game. I don't know if you say you throw it out, if that's the right way to say it, but you almost have to. It is so out of character with everything else on Ohio State's resume. We know that's a rivalry game. We know that's a game with a lot of pressure around Ryan Day. That feels like a big, big, big outlier on OSU's season. You go back and look, a 35-7 win over a pretty good Iowa team. The loss to Oregon, that was only a point, that was on the road. You got a 20-13 win at Penn State that looks a little bit better now. 38-15 win over Indiana. I know Indiana was the punchline of the college football world for about 2 hours in its opener in the playoff against Notre Dame. I think that was kind of unfair, and Indiana did kind of close the gap at the end. So I think you go back and look at that. If you just kind of throw Michigan out is a separate thing. This looks like a dominant football team. It's played like one. Texas, on the other hand, has played like a dominant football team at times. Unfortunately, that's usually been for about a half. I thought the Arizona State game kind of summed up their season. They look like they're going to run away with it on talent alone. Something happens. The game gets interesting. But if you want to say we're going to throw something out for Ohio State, it's a much bigger leap to do it for Texas. But what I would be getting at with that point is, Chase, when Texas has it rolling and it's really, the game at hand has got its full attention, They have come close to achieving the level of dominance that we've seen for Ohio State over full games, in about a half here and there, for whatever that's worth.
No, yeah, I completely agree with you. And look, we've been saying this. It's really the start of the season into the summer. Even this Texas roster is it's loaded. I mean, they've got a lot of talent. It's up and down in every position. They've got depth, and that's one of the things that going into this season that really stood out to me was the depth that Texas has, and I think that's really what has sustained them to this point, and what could keep sustaining them on and maybe to a national championship is the depth that they have, which not a lot of teams have. Um, they lost a running back in preseason. Well, they're still running the ball really good with the ones they have. Like they've just had guys step up. Isaiah Bond was hurt. We thought he was going to be their main guy, and he missed some, and other receivers stepped up. And so that's what's really stood out to me about this Texas team. And while, yes, they don't always play like the most talented roster, I feel like they do. And that's something they just have to get figured out and maybe get on the same page. I don't know, but I really like this roster Texas had. But you could say the same thing for Ohio State, because I think they have one of the most talented quarterbacks and receivers, out there in college football right now. So, and I know we'll dive into the matchup more in just a second, but to me, when you just look at these two teams' rosters and just up and down the depth that they have, this is an incredible matchup that I'm looking forward to seeing.
All right, we're going to dive deeper into the matchups on each side of the ball. Before we do that, a reminder, we are brought to you by BetOnline. If you want to bet on this game, BetOnline is the place to do it. Again, it has Ohio State as about a 6-point favorite as we do this the Monday before the game. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to BetOnline today. Don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Let's start with a conversation, Chase Robinson, about Ohio State's offense. This unit has been fairly unstoppable of late. Will Howard, the Kansas State quarterback, leads that offense. I guess the talk of college football lately has maybe been that receiving core, and particularly Jeremiah Smith, who just, basically said, hey, if you try to single cover us, if you're Oregon, it's going to be a disaster, and they backed it up. They've got talented backs in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, both of whom could go over 1,000 yards rushing before the end of the season. Now, they do have a key absence in Seth McLaughlin, who's been out a couple of games now with injury. This Ohio State offense, I don't know if there's a unit in the country that at the end of the season, again, throughout Michigan, was playing better than what the Buckeyes were doing on offense, Chase.
Yeah, I mean, Will Howard, 34, almost 3,500 yards, 32 touchdowns so far this season. And then, what Jeremiah Smith has done is incredible. He is so much fun to watch. Great receiver. He's caught 14 touchdowns. He has 1,224 yards, averages like 17 and a half yards per reception. So he's just incredible. Emeka Egbuka has 10 touchdowns, 896 yards. He also is a great receiver. And you mentioned Henderson and Judkins as well. And I know Ole Miss fans remember Quinshon Judkins and what he did with the Rebels, but he's having a great season. He's scored 10 times on 924 yards for the Buckeyes. Henderson 925 yards and 10 touchdowns. So they're very, very similar there. They're two running backs. They get a lot of touches. This is just a dynamic offense, and they got great guys to block for him as well. Will Howard has time. That's one thing that I feel like I see every time I watch them is the offensive line just gives him time to work, and he was able to put it up there, and these guys are able to bring it down flawlessly. And so I think that's what stands out to me. And I know we'll get into Texas defense here in a second, but that could be something they exploit is try to put a lot of pressure on Will Howard, because right now he's not getting much, and he's able to do whatever he wants to do.
Yeah, 500 yards of offense for Ohio State in a fairly lopsided win that again avenged one of its only 2 losses early in the season against Oregon. Okay, I think the fun thing about this matchup to me, not that Ohio State's defense and Texas's offense are anything to shake a stick at, but I think this is a strength on strength matchup because Texas's defense, just player for player, I don't know that anybody in the country is better. I know ending the regular season, I think Texas had twice as many interceptions as it had allowed touchdown passes. That is amazing. You go across the ball, they've got dudes everywhere. They've got a stud linebacker, Anthony Hill, 107 tackles, 16 for loss, 7.5 sacks, and a touchdown. You've got defensive backs. Their secondary was about as gifted as anybody's. Andrew Bakuba, the Clemson transfer, who had an outstanding season at safety. Jahdae Barron, award-winning defensive back for the Longhorns. You go to the defensive line, Alfred Collins, Colin Simmons, Barron Sorrell, Vernon Broughton. All those guys were terrific. You have Malik Muhammad at defensive back, who had the play of the season and the pick that beat Arizona State. You got Ethan Burke, who was a reserve defensive lineman, Conference USA Player of the Year last year. Just another guy on this defense. We said it all year. I watched them in person when they came to Nashville. Just so much talent, so much depth. Again, Texas, the performance at times could be uneven, but I don't think there's any questioning the talent that I can see anywhere on this defense.
Yeah, and I mentioned the pressure that they're going to have to put on Will Howard. Well, it helps when you have guys along that defensive line like Colin Simmons, who has 14 tackles for loss and 9 sacks. Barron Sorrell, 11 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Broughton with 3 sacks. So these guys, Alfred Collins, who gets in there, like these guys up front for this Texas defensive line. They're good. They're going to pressure you. They're going to do things I feel like that other teams haven't been able to do to Ohio State yet. I feel like this Texas defense can do that. They're that good, and we've been talking about them all season. We watch Texas week in and week out. You mentioned you saw them in person when they played at Vandy. Like, this is a really good defense. This has been the name of the game because, look, let's be honest, they've been inconsistent offensively. We'll get to their offense in a minute, but this Texas defense has held their own all season long, and this is a really exciting part of the matchup because I feel like the way Texas defense works is it's a good matchup to face Will Howard and Jeremiah Smith and Mbuka and these guys. Like, this Texas defense, I feel like can do some big things.
Yeah, I think a key will be, can they collapse the pocket, throw down on Will Howard's amount of time to throw, and can they cover Smith in the secondary? Certainly, I think if anybody's got a chance to do it, it's Texas. All right, now for Texas's offense, but perhaps almost as talented as the defense, but erratic at times. Not bad, not ever bad, but just you never quite knew what you were going to get from day to day. Quinn Ewers at times looked unstoppable. Everybody knows they've got Arch Manning behind him. You had the whole distraction of, is he going to hit the portal for $6 million or whatever the rumors were? But you got Quinn Ewers for this one. You got Arch Manning backing him up, who's more of the running threat. Ewers, when he is on a heater, is a good and accurate a quarterback as you'll find in college football. Matthew Golden really came on down the stretch late of the season, had that catch against Arizona State, which really saved their season. They've got Gunnar Helm. I don't know if he's the best tight end in the country, but I don't know that anybody's better. They've got other playmakers like DeAndre Moore. Silas Bolden, when they need him in a pinch, can give them something. the rushing attack. Wisner and Jaydon Blue both did things at times that really got you excited. I had some games where they really ran for a lot of yards. This is, again, it is just like the defense, a very, very deep and talented unit. The consistency was just sort of the issue there at times.
Yeah, that's the truth. And I think back to the Clemson game for Texas and how they ran the ball. They ran the ball so well. Clemson could not stop them. And so they're multifaceted because they're able to use their great receivers as well. You mentioned some of those names of guys who catch the ball, like Matthew Golden. He's caught 9 touchdowns for 936 yards this season. Gunnar Helm has been tremendous. DeAndre Moore caught 7 touchdowns. Silas Bolden, you mentioned whether or not he shows up in the stat column or the touchdown column, like he's crucial for this team. Just his presence on the field and his leadership, and they're just so deep. That's one thing that has stood out to me a lot about this team is the depth and again, being able to run the ball the way they do consistently. Whether the quarterbacks are consistent, whether the receivers are consistently catching it, I feel like this run game has been consistent this year, and that's something they can go to if there is inconsistency in other positions. They've always got that run game, which I feel like has been consistent all season.
Yeah, if you want kind of a barometer of the talent on the roster, Silas Bolden was a really nice player and a big part of Oregon State's offense. He transfers in. I'm not going to say he was an afterthought on the team because they always had him there, but for a lot of the year he was. Some of the plays that he made came later in the season, but again, that's not really an indictment on Silas Bolden, who had 54 catches, 746 yards, 5 scores last year, as much as it is indicative of just how much talent Texas can run out against you on offense. Chase, let's talk Ohio State defense. I said that the offense was the standout unit on that side. The defense, though, isn't far behind. You start looking at all Big Ten teams, those kind of things. 3 of the 4 linemen for the Buckeyes made one of the Big Ten's first 3 all Big Ten postseason teams. You've got a couple of linebackers in Cody Simon and Sonny Styles, who are also second and third team Big Ten selections. You got Caleb Downs, the safety, who we saw a year ago in the SEC. Yeah, this is a team that's got plenty of talent on that side of the ball. Lathan Ransom also at defensive back. Stars all over the field. I think this side is going to be fun watching those guys run around, trying to get pressure on Quinn Ewers. I mean, these teams have so many stars.
Yeah.
It's like you forgot to mention the best left tackle in the business we did earlier when we talked about Texas. Ohio State will try to get a pass rush against that. I just think this side of the matchup is going to be a lot of fun too.
It is. And you look at some of these guys, especially along the defensive line, really stands out to me. Jack Sawyer, defensive end, has been really great this year. He's got 8 sacks on the season, 8 tackles for loss. He's a very big presence and has been a big presence in the college football playoff games. If you've watched their first 2 against Tennessee and Oregon, they've called his name a lot. And then JT Tuimoloau, the defensive lineman, 17 tackles for loss and 10 sacks. So he gets back there, causes a lot of havoc in the backfield. Ty Hamilton, defensive lineman, has 6 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. And you mentioned Cody Simon, the linebacker, has 7 sacks, 12 tackles for loss. Sonny Styles with 7 sacks. Caleb Downs, 7 sacks. Lathan Ransom, 7 sacks. Look, these guys are a pressure-packed team. They're going to put pressure on you, and that's something Texas is going to have to be ready for. Just the sheer number of guys who they're going to see penetrate the offensive line and get into the backfield.
All right, let's get into picks and why. We'll start with you.
I'm having a hard time with this one. Obviously, Texas, very good football team. They're great defensively. I think they're finding some consistency offensively. I just Ohio State is just dominating people right
Yeah.
now, and so it's hard to pick against the Buckeyes. Just from what I've seen in their first two games, they look like a different team than what we saw in the regular season. So I'm going to have to take Ohio State to win this game just because the sheer domination we've seen in the first two playoff games.
Yeah, there was a lot of buildup in the offseason on both these teams. Texas coming off the playoff run last year, Ohio State based on what it did in the portal. I mean, the Buckeyes went all in. Well, you can grab Caleb Downs off an SEC roster. That tells me you mean business. To me, I think, and I'm hoping we get both these teams at their best, okay? For Ohio State, other than the Michigan game, pretty consistent week to week. Texas, again, it depended game to game and really half to half of game to game. I think this is, like you, a reasonably even matchup, but Ohio State, to me, just was more consistent on a week-to-week basis. Now, this is the Cotton Bowl. Texas is going to have geographic proximity on its side, but I'm going to go with what I've seen most recently. If Ohio State had just closed out Arizona State with a little bit more authority, I mean, that game for a minute felt like they were about to be eliminated. And that's what bothers me about Texas. I just kept saying all season, you want to see out of these guys game in and game out, half in and half out. It never came. I'm going to go with Ohio State for that reason, but anything could happen here. If you think this is going to be an Ohio State blowout, I think you might be in for a surprise. In any case, we will be here to wrap it up afterwards. Be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button and enable your notifications. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. You've been watching Southeastern 16, presented by BetOnline.